Have you ever tried to overcome something, maybe a bad habit or negative thinking or an illness or a difficult situation? More times than not, in order to have victory over something, you have to be intentionally, deliberately working to overcome it. Otherwise, that thing, whatever it is likely to overpower you instead. We should approach sin the same way. Unless we are intentionally trying to overcome sin, it will overpower us. Sin is dangerous, deceitful, and destructive, and has the power to enslave us. But we absolutely can have victory over it. But, like anything else, we have to be intentional about it. For starters, we need to recognize it for what it is. I have a riddle for you that I borrowed from Abraham Lincoln. If you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs does he have? Still just four legs. You can call its tail whatever you want to. It doesn't change the fact that it's still a tail. Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." We can call sin whatever we want to. It doesn't change what it is. Proverbs 28:13 says, "One who conceals his wrongdoings will not prosper, but one who confesses and abandons them will find compassion." If we're going to be victorious over sin, we can't try to hide it or dress it up. We must confess it and abandon it. Joseph from the Old Testament gives us a great example of what to do when tempted to sin. When Potiphar's wife was tempting him, he ran. Genesis 39:12 says, "So she grabbed him by his garment, saying, 'Sleep with me.' But he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside." Interestingly enough, the word left in this verse, when referring to Joseph leaving his garment in her hand, is the Hebrew word azav, which means to loose or forsake, and is the same word used in Proverbs 28:13 when it talks about confessing and abandoning sin. The account of Joseph is a great visual representation of how we should respond to sin. Abandon it and run. He abandoned his garment in her hand and fled. Just like with Joseph, there is always a way out, a way of escape from temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you except something common to mankind, and God is faithful, so he will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it." There's always an opportunity to escape so that we can flee from sin. And that's exactly what we need to do. Flee, not tiptoe around it, seeing how close we can get. We have made many trips from North Carolina to Michigan, which involves driving through the Appalachian Mountains. During a part of the trip in Virginia, we are high up on a mountain, and over the edge, we can see towns, trees, rivers, and much more far below. It's always so pretty. The closer you get to the edge of the road, the more you can see. Do you know how many times we've hit the guardrails on the side of the road looking at the beautiful scenery? Never. When driving in this area, we are careful to stay alert and focused and not get anywhere near the edge of the mountain, no matter how much of the view we might be missing. Because no matter how beautiful it might be, it's not worth losing our lives driving over the side of the mountain to see it. We should treat sin the same way. We don't need to drive close to the edge because we think there's a better view. No, we need to stay as far away as possible. As the Bible tells us, we should flee from it. The Bible gives several commands to flee from sin. 1 Corinthians says to flee from sexual immorality and flee from idolatry. The Bible teaches us to flee from sin and pursue righteousness, among other things. 1 Timothy 6:11 says, "But flee from these things, you man of God, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness." And 2 Timothy 2:22 says, "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart." Flee sin and pursue righteousness. Two key steps instrumental in overcoming sin. The Greek word for flee in these verses is fugo, which according to Thayer means to flee away, seek safety by flight. It is the same word that is used in Matthew 2:13 when Joseph is instructed to take Mary and Jesus and flee to Egypt. It says, "Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, 'Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him.'" Flee to Egypt. Flee away. Seek safety by flight. The same thing that we should be doing in regards to sin. The word pursue in these verses from 1st and 2nd Timothy is from the Greek word dioko, which, according to Thayer, means to pursue, meaning to seek after eagerly, earnestly endeavor to acquire. So we are to run away from sin, flee away, seek safety by flight, and run towards righteousness. Abandon sin and pursue the things of God. Sin is deceitful and dangerous, with grave consequences. If we don't abandon it, or flee from it, we will become slaves to it. John 8:34 through 36 says, Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave of sin. Now the slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son does remain forever. So if the Son sets you free, you really will be free." We don't need to live as slaves to sin. We can have victory and freedom. Jesus died to give us victory over sin. Romans 6:6 says, "Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him, in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin." And 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "He made him who knew no sin to be sin in our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him." And 1 Peter 2:24 says, "And he himself brought our sins in his body up on the cross, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds you were healed." We hear it again here. Die to sin, live for righteousness. Like the verses from 1st and 2nd Timothy saying, flee from sin, pursue righteousness. It's a two-step intentional process. Unless we are intentionally trying to overcome sin, it will overpower us. Sin is dangerous, deceitful, and destructive, and has the power to enslave us. But we absolutely can have victory over it in two simple, although not necessarily easy, steps. Flee from sin and pursue righteousness. Run away from sin and run toward God.